Hey everyone, welcome back. We are diving into SESGOS today by Charlie Wickstrom. And, if you've ever worked anywhere, really, this idea of workplace culture can be kind of, I don't know, a little bit of a minefield.
Definitely.
But this book, SESGOS, it really, cuts through a lot of the BS.
It does.
And offers some really insightful and surprisingly practical ideas about building a better work environment. And I think especially for those of you who are in these high-pressure fields,
absolutely,
air traffic controlled emergency rooms even, high-stakes business negotiations.
For sure.
This one's for you.
You hit the nail on the head there. I think SESGOS is so refreshing because it doesn't just point fingers at what's wrong. It really equips you with the tools to actually build something better.
Yes.
And it grounds all of this in behavioral science, which I find incredibly compelling.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the first things that really struck me was this concept of the illusion of control.
It's everywhere, isn't it? This belief that we can somehow manage and predict human behavior in the same way that we manage budgets or project timelines.
Right.
But humans are not spreadsheets.
Right.
And failing to recognize that, especially in these high-stakes industries, can have some pretty disastrous consequences.
Yeah, and Wickstrom uses a really, I think, chilling example of this.
Yeah.
The Piper Alpha disaster. Do you remember that?
Of course.
That massive oil rig explosion back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a story that I think really highlights how easily our faith in technology and these rigid systems can really blindside us.
Absolutely.
To very human vulnerabilities.
It's a stark reminder that even with all the safety protocols in the world, if you don't understand the why behind people's actions, if you don't have that culture of open communication and trust, even the most sophisticated systems can fail.
That reminds me of a time, actually, I'm curious for you.
Yeah.
Have you encountered this in your own work?
Oh, yeah.
Where, this over-reliance on metrics, or maybe just really strict rules, actually ended up doing more harm than good?
Oh, tons of times. I mean, it's almost like you can't avoid it.
Right.
No matter what field you're in, right? You hit that point where you're like, oh, wow, it's way more complex than any sort of system that we could try to put on it.
Yeah, and that's what I think SESGOS really digs into so well, is that complexity.
Yeah.
And it talks about this danger of, this idea that's been around for so long of viewing employees as just like cogs in a machine.
Yeah.
And I think that really resonated with me.
Well, it's this very reductionist view, isn't it? Like, if you can just optimize the individual parts, the whole system will run smoothly.
Right.
But SESGOS does a great job, I think, of highlighting how human beings are not interchangeable widgets, right? We all come with our own baggage, our own experiences, biases, motivations.
Totally. And it's like that example, from the book, that classic example of the Ford assembly line, which, at the time was revolutionary.
Oh, absolutely. It was a marvel of efficiency.
Right.
But at what cost, right?
Right.
And that's what I appreciate about SESGOS. It doesn't shy away from the downsides.
Yeah.
Worker dissatisfaction went through the roof.
Of course.
Turnover was incredibly high.
Yeah.
And what was the root cause?
Right.
It wasn't the machinery itself.
Right.
It was the human impact of that kind of repetitive, dehumanizing work.
Yeah.
They were so focused on efficiency that they totally overlooked the psychological needs of their workforce.
And I think that's where SESGOS is so valuable.
Yeah.
Because it reminds us that to really understand this stuff, we have to look beyond, just the traditional business lens.
So sure.
Right. We need psychology. We need sociology.
100%.
Even anthropology, right?
Yeah. You're talking about human beings.
Yes.
Not just numbers and processes.
Right.
And I think understanding those human needs, that need for autonomy, for purpose, for connection.
Yes.
That's the key to building a truly effective organization, one that's actually sustainable.
Okay, so how do we take this from theory to practice? Because, it's one thing to talk about it.
Yeah.
But how do we actually implement a more human-centric approach?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And I think that's where SESGOS really shines, because it doesn't just diagnose the problem. It actually gives you a roadmap.
Okay.
And it starts with a thorough diagnosis, not just treating the symptoms, right? Right.
But really getting to the root causes of the behaviors that we're seeing.
And this is where he introduces that 4 elements framework, right?
Exactly.
Can you walk us through that a little bit? Because I think that's such a valuable tool.
Yeah, so the 4 elements essentially provide you with these 4 different lenses to examine your organization.
Okay.
So you've got error precursors, you've got decision-making, complex problems, and symptoms of lack of cultural evolution.
Okay.
And it really just encourages you to ask the right questions.
Okay.
What are those subtle factors that might be increasing the risk of errors?
Okay.
How are decisions actually being made on the ground?
Yeah.
How well are we addressing complex problems?
Right.
And are there any signs that maybe our culture is actually hindering progress? Mm-hmm. Right. It's about connecting the dots.
Right.
Because a lot of times these issues aren't just like isolated incidents.
Exactly.
It's all symptomatic of...
It's a system.
Yeah, these deeper systemic issues.
Totally.
And the 4 elements give you a framework to kind of unpack all of that.
100%. And one of the things I find most helpful in there is this idea of error precursors.
Yeah.
These seemingly insignificant factors.
Yeah.
Multitasking, rushing, complacency.
Right.
That can actually snowball into much bigger issues.
Totally. It's like that old saying, right?
Right.
For want of a nail.
Exactly.
The shoe was lost.
Yep. And we often overlook the small stuff until it creates this huge problem.
Right. Exactly. And so SESGOS encourages us to be really honest with ourselves about what are those blind spots?
Absolutely.
Both in our own thinking, but also in the systems that we create.
Yeah. Are we setting ourselves up for failure?
Right.
In some way?
Yeah. So I think a good exercise for our listeners would be to think about that.
Yeah.
In your own work environment.
Absolutely.
What are those error precursors?
What's flying under the radar?
Yes. What are those subtle things that might be increasing the risk of mistakes, even if they seem small on the surface?
And I would encourage everyone listening, don't just stop at identifying them.
Right.
Ask yourself, what's creating the conditions for those behaviors to flourish in the first place?
Oh, that's good.
Are there unrealistic deadlines?
Ooh, good one.
Is there a culture of fear that prevents people from speaking up about potential issues?
It's about getting to the root of it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just like putting out fires all the time.
100%. And, one of the things I often hear when this whole human-centered approach comes up is, but how do you measure it? Right. People want data.
Yeah.
Give me the numbers.
Right.
How do we measure a good work environment?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I was actually just thinking, that's one of the biggest misconceptions.
Right.
Right? This idea that, like, you can't measure this stuff.
Yeah.
And SESGOS doesn't shy away from that at all.
No, it doesn't.
Like, it actually tackles that head on.
It does. And what I appreciate is that it doesn't say, get rid of metrics.
Right.
It's about choosing the right ones. Yeah. Metrics that actually reflect a healthy and effective organization.
So instead of just measuring, like, output, you're measuring things like employee well-being or how well teams are communicating and collaborating.
Exactly. And one of the key ones that comes up in SESGOS is psychological safety.
Okay. I'm really interested to hear more about that because I know it's something that like we've thrown around a couple times.
Yeah.
But for someone who's never actually like heard that term before, how would you define that?
Yeah. So imagine you're in a meeting.
Okay.
And you have a thought, right? Maybe it's a question, maybe it's a completely out there idea.
Right.
But you hesitate to speak up.
Right.
You're worried about maybe being judged or shut down or even ridiculed.
Right.
That lack of safety, that fear of being vulnerable, that's the opposite of psychological safety.
So it's that feeling of trust within a team where everyone feels comfortable like taking risks, admitting mistakes, voicing their opinions.
100%.
Without, fear of being punished for it.
And SESGOS drives home this point that this isn't just some nice to have. Right. This is mission critical for innovation, for communication, for organizational success, especially in these high stakes fields we've been talking about, where even a small error can be catastrophic.
Right. And the best part is like measuring psychological safety doesn't have to be this big complicated thing.
No, not at all.
Like SESGOS offers some really practical tips.
Yeah.
Like really simple things you can do.
It can be as simple as asking your team, do you feel comfortable speaking up in meetings?
Right.
Do you feel like your opinion is valued?
Right.
Do you feel safe saying, I don't know?
Yes.
Or I made a mistake?
It's about creating a space for those honest conversations to happen.
Yeah, just that foundation of respect.
Yes, where people feel heard.
Yeah.
Even when they disagree.
Exactly.
And that I think is what I really took away from SESGOS.
Yeah.
This idea that at the end of the day, it's all about the people.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Recognizing that our organizations, no matter how complex or how sophisticated they are ultimately driven by human beings.
It's all driven by humans.
And if we can understand and value that humy element, if we can kind of shift our focus from control to understanding,
let go of that illusion of control.
Yes, then we can unlock those levels of safety and efficiency and innovation that, we didn't even think were possible.
Totally.
So for all you deep divers out there, I hope this has given you a lot to think about.
Lots to chew on.
And remember, the next time you walk into work, just take a look around. Try to see beyond the spreadsheets and the to-do lists.
Yeah.
Look for those error precursors, both in yourself and in your workplace.
Be honest with yourself.
Yes, and ask yourself, how can I create a more human-centered environment starting today?